Um, I want to look at the issue of returning of the tithes and offering, how and when. And one of the questions that arises is passing and collecting tithes on the Sabbath. Is it biblical? This is a response using the Holy Bible and the spirit of prophecy. We want to see what it talks about this issue. And this is number 8 in our series of the benevolent system. And so, text for meditation from Testimonies to Gospel to Ministers and Gospel Workers, page 69. But we see that God of heaven sometimes commissions men to teach that which is regarded as contrary to the established doctrines, because those who were once the depositaries of truth became unfaithful to the sacred trust. The Lord shows others who will receive the bright beams of the Sun of Righteousness and will advocate truths that were not in accordance with the ideas of religious leaders. And then these leaders, in the blindness of their minds, give full sway to what is supposed to be righteous indignation against the ones who have set aside cherished fables. They act like men who have lost their reason. They do not consider the possibility that they themselves have not rightly understood the word. They will not open their eyes to discern the fact that they have misinterpreted and misapplied the scriptures and have built up false theories, calling them fundamental doctrines of the faith. How were tithes gathered in the Old Testament? How were tithes and even offerings gathered in the Old Testament? In 2 Kings chapter 12, verse 9 and 10, but Jehoiada, the priest, took a chest and bored a hole in the lid of it and set it beside the altar on the right side as one cometh into the house of the Lord. And the priest that kept the door put therein all the money that was brought into the house of the Lord. And it was so, when they saw that there was much money in the chest, that the king's scribe and the high priest came, and they put up in bags and told the money that was found in the house of the Lord. And at the king's commandment, they made a chest and set it without at the gate of the house of the Lord. And they made a proclamation through Judah and Jerusalem to bring in to the Lord the collection that Moses, the servant of God, laid upon Israel in the wilderness. And all the princes and all the people rejoiced and brought in and cast into the chest until they had made an end. Now it came to pass that at what time the chest was brought unto the king's office by the hand of the Levites, and when they saw that there was much money, the king's scribe and the high priest officer came and emptied the chest, and took it and carried it to his place again. Thus they did day by day and gathered money in abundance. 2 Chronicles 24, verse 8 to 11. How did Jesus and the disciples deposit their tithes and their monies in the sanctuary? Desire of Ages, page 614. Jesus was in the court where the treasure chests, and he watched those who came to deposit their gifts. Men of the rich brought large sums, which they presented with great ostentation. Jesus looked upon them sadly, but made no comment on their liberal offerings. Presently, his countenance lighted as he saw a poor widow approach hesitatingly, as though fearful of being observed. As the rich and haughty swept by to deposit their offerings, she shrank back as if hardly daring to venture further, and yet she longed to do something, little though it might be, for the cause she loved. She looked at the gift in her hand. It was very small in comparison with the gifts of those around her, yet it was her all. Watching her opportunity, she hurriedly threw in her 2 mites and turned to hasten away. But in doing this, she caught the eye of Jesus, which was fastened earnestly upon her. Desire of Ages, page 614. Did Jesus approve plate passing in the temple? In Mark 11:15 to 17, and they come to Jerusalem, and Jesus went into the temple and began to cast out them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of the money changers and the seats of them that sold doves, and would not suffer that any man should carry any vessel through the temple. And he taught, saying unto them, Is it not written, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves? When did the early church return their tithes? Now, concerning the collection for the saints, I have given order to the churches of Galatia, even so do ye. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gathering when I come. Is Paul's counsel still valid today? The direction given by the Holy Spirit through the Apostle Paul in regard to gifts present a principle that applies also to tithing. Upon the first day of the week, let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him. Parents and children here included, Adventist Home, page 389. In Counsels on Stewardship, page 80, and what more appropriate time could be chosen for setting aside the tithe and presenting an offering to God? On the Sabbath, we have thought upon his goodness. We have beheld his work in creation as an evidence of his power in redemption. Our hearts are filled with thankfulness for his great love. And now, before the toil of our week begins, we return to him his own, and with it an offering to testify our gratitude. Thus, our practice will be a weekly sermon declaring that God is the possessor of all our property and that he has made us stewards to use it to his glory. Every acknowledgement of obligation to God will strengthen the sense of obligation. Gratitude deepens as we give it expression, and the joy it brings is life to soul and body. So we find that as the week starts, lay in store, and before we start another week, um, uh, and before the toil of a week begins, we return to him his own. And it should not be passing of the plates in the church, but a place should be designed and dedicated that those who move into the sanctuary should quietly go there and put their tithes and offering without passing the 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 vessels or the basins in the church. During the week, every day you have been laying aside what you should bring before the Lord. We don't have to have this commotion and passing of plates in the church. You come from home, you have already put in your envelope that which you have been setting aside every day. And now, as you enter into the house of the Lord, the first thing is to put in the chest that which you have to avoid this passing of plates. Did the pioneers of the SDA Church follow Paul's counsel? Systematic benevolence in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, page 12, paragraph 4. Systematic benevolence in the early days of the message, men impelled by the urge of conviction went forth to preach the newfound truths. They were dependent for their support upon their own labors or the free will offerings of the believer. Such an uncertain method was more or less spasmodic and fluctuating. Early in 1859, the need for a more certain plan was felt, and earnest study was given to the matter. There grew out of this study the plan called systematic benevolence. In harmony with 1 Corinthians 16:2, giving regularly on the first day of the week was recommended, and as suggested by 2 Corinthians 8:12-14, an equitable distribution of financial responsibility. The plan called for brethren to lay by in store weekly from 5 to 25 cents, the sisters from 2 to 10 cents, and for the property owners to give weekly from 1 to 5 cents on each $100 worth of assets. So the pioneers brought what they had during the first day of the week. That is what was recommended. The plan was generally received with favor, and here received the endorsement of the spirit of prophecy. The greatest sin in the church was pointed out to be covetousness. Systematic benevolence was not presented as a perfected plan, for it was also stated that God is leading his people in the matter and is bringing them up, page 199 of the same book. As plans for support of the work and the ministry broadened, the spirit of liberality was encouraged more and more until at length light from the scriptures revealed the system of tithe and offering as they are known in the church today. After the plan of paying tithe was presented to the believer, Sister Maud Sisley was usually one of the first in line when the collector came by on Sunday mornings. Now, there's one thing that we have to find that is in Adventist Review, March 3, 1994, paragraph 12, page 12. In the early pioneer days, there was a tithe collector who was paid by the church to collect tithe from the members. That is how it was seen as efficient for gathering the church money. Something that we don't find in the Bible, but people were being led into perfection of the gospel order. Later on, people started returning tithe by putting in the envelopes, by indicating on the envelopes their tithes and offering, and then returning to the church treasurer. Continued on, what does inspiration say about money raising on the Sabbath? We are told in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 1, page 471, a great mistake has been made by some who profess present truth by introducing merchandise in the course of a series of meetings and by their traffic diverting minds from the object of the meetings. If Christ were now upon the earth, he would drive out these peddlers and traffickers, whether they be ministers or people, with a scourge of small cords, as when he entered the temple anciently and cast out all them that sold and bought in the temple, and overthrew the tables of money changers, and the seats of them that sold doves, and said unto them, It is written, My house shall be called the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves. These traffickers might have pleaded as an excuse that the articles they held for sale were for sacrificial offerings, but their object was to get gain, to obtain means to accumulate. Now, there's this habit of income meetings in the church. Somebody brings a property, a banana, somebody brings a cow, somebody brings a goat or a sheep. And then during just even the Sabbath hours, this is brought on what we can call a stock exchange. The highest bidder takes it. And so you have people saying, I have 100. The other one says, I have 200. The other one says, I have 300. And it goes like that. And the person who is selling starts 1 for 200, 2 for 200. And before he goes to 3, another one raises his hand, I have 600. And so the business continues going on like that, as if this was a common market. God forbid such a things. It should not be done in the sanctuary of the Lord, where the Lord is worshipped. Such a things are not encouraged in the house of the Lord. Again, who can truthfully say our gold is tried in the fire, our garments are unspotted by the world? I saw our instructor pointing to the garments of so-called righteousness. Stripping them off, he laid bare the defilement beneath. Then he said to me, Can you not see how they have pretentiously covered up their defilement and rottenness of character? How is the faithful city become a harlot? My father's house is made a house of merchandise, a place when the divine presence and glory have departed. For this cause there is weakness and strength is lacking. Testimonies for the Church, Volume 8, page 250. And so what conclusions can we have? Seen there are no biblical examples or authorization to collect funds during services in the sanctuary, then, as the testimony of history bears out, plate passing must have originated outside of the Bible and made its way into Catholicism, Protestantism, and then into Seventh-day Adventist Church sometime after Ellen White's death in 1915. As there is a call for revival and reformation from our church leadership, then this unbiblical pagan custom should be one of the first things to reform, lest we lose the favor of God. As the practice of plate passing and money raising goals in the church sanctuary on the Holy Sabbath day resulted in Christ cleansing the temple, so too in the end of time, when judgment for the living first begins with the church, will Christ cleanse his church from the abomination practiced in her midst. We shouldn't be seeing such a things going on in our churches, where plates are passed and such a things are done, such a things are done. We should seek to come to the biblical way of doing things. And as I try to bring this to a close, I'll try just to look at the one issue that is pending, what she says about this issue of plate passing. And so we have to go back to our Bibles and see what the Bible is instructing us to do. And as faithful Bereans, as faithful Bereans, we should do what the word of the Lord says. And so in bringing this to a close, I'd like us to read this. Shall we take up collections on the Sabbath? This is MS 176, 1907. The question is, shall we take up collections on the Sabbath? MS 176, 1907. The question has been brought before me, shall we take up collections on the Sabbath? The occurrence which brought up the question was that of taking up a collection to purchase an organ for the church. I replied that I will not advise this being done. When collections are taken on the Sabbath for foreign missionary work, it is that the gospel may be given to those who are in darkness. So there is a time when collections can be done on the Sabbath for foreign missionary work, and we had what we call the 13th Sabbath, something of that kind in the mainstream church, where there was a collection for the foreign work. She says, when this is done, it is done that the gospel may be given to those who are in darkness. And so it is not a violation of the Sabbath. Remember, even in the sanctuary of the old, there was sacrifices and offerings that were made on the Sabbath and they were acceptable. But there are other things which were not acceptable on the Sabbath. Even the building of the sanctuary was forbidden, or the bringing in the free will offerings for building the sanctuary was not to be brought on the Sabbath. I believe so. On Friday, everything came to an end. But when it came to the sacrifices and other things that the priests themselves did in the sanctuary, it was accepted before the Lord. And so we are told that when we do a collection on the Sabbath for foreign missionary work, this is not a violation of the Sabbath. This is a genuine missionary work, and often this collection could not be taken up so fully at any other time. So the only time to bring them was on the Sabbath. Together, this offering could not be called transgression of the Sabbath. That is the collection for the foreign missionary work. But remember, this is different from what we call tithes and offering. Tithes and offering, you start laying up from the first day of the week, and you put it in an envelope. When you come to the house of the Lord, you put it at a designated place where the chest has been made, and the treasury will look into that instead of passing plates and going around the house of the Lord and doing all this manner of stuff and making the house of the Lord a common place. Also, I believe this collection of the missionary work, something is set in a place indicated for this, and the people can bring it on the Sabbath and put it there. It is not like plates are being passed here and there. And so continued on, but if this is to open the way for the taking up of contribution for such a purposes as the buying of instruments of music, then I will advise that it be discontinued. If the collections are for buying instruments of music and other stuff which are not directly for the missionary work of opening the Bible to those who are in places in darkness, this should be discontinued. Instruction was given me that collections taken on the Sabbath for such a purposes sometimes left on minds impressions that counteracted the good they might otherwise receive. For this reason, I say it is better that the music be defective than that one soul be tempted on this point. Let our people avoid the passing of the contribution boxes, even if it become a much more difficult matter than it now is to raise money for foreign mission work. And so, if the passing of the boxes, and they should not be passed, the passing of the boxes, they should be put in a place and the people just come there and put their offerings. But if it comes to a point they will be passed, the boxes for the contribution of the foreign missionary work, and this gives a way of passing boxes for other contribution, we are told that this should be stopped. It will be well if our brethren and sisters would consider the advisability of laying by during the week their offerings for foreign missionary work. As they call to mind the blessing and mercies that God is affording them, let them put a thank offering in an envelope. These envelopes could be presented on the Sabbath when it could be stated for what purpose they were intended. If perplexed to know how the offering should be applied, they can leave it to the judgment of the church officers, and these officers in turn should state just how every dollar has been applied. The sacredness of the Sabbath could be in no way violated by such a gift, and the results will be for good. There will be no occasion for distrust. The Lord will be honored, and the blessings to giver and receiver will be increased. The possession of a willing heart will make the giving a joy to the receiver, and the gift will bring to the receiver the assurance that the Lord was mindful of his necessities. My brethren and sisters, trust this method, try this method. Let there be no collections taken on Sabbath, but let praise and thanks offering be made. The time of our Sabbath service should be a season of praise and thanksgiving to God, and it can be made a time of blessing to all who assemble. If short sermons were preached and time given for all to bear testimony, the people will give away the people will cool away refreshed and be blessed. No harm will be done if, in order to give time to all to speak, the meeting were to be continued for 2 or 3 hours. Then the time spent in physical fasting will be a season of spiritual feasting to all who appropriated the blessings of the hour. Many will find relief as they acknowledge the goodness and mercy of God. Their witness to the mercy and love of God will help and bless other souls. These are thank offerings the Lord delights to receive. We are much nearer the end of earth history than many suppose, said my instructor. The time has come when we need to devote much time to prayer and testimony meetings. After the discourse, time should be given for all who desire to speak. The Lord will have his people make the Sabbath a day of special seeking after him. Shall we not try this? Let this work be entered into in our large churches in such cities as Los Angeles. Let us hold meetings in which church members can have opportunity to give expression to the feelings of the soul. Christ is watching with intense interest his church in the earth. He will be pleased to have Sabbaths made more devotional, and angels of God will listen as we witness to the goodness and his love. And so the conclusion of the matter is this. Tithes and offering can be returned on the Sabbath in the envelopes and put in a box designated in a place where there will be no straw and there will be no passing of boxes and offertory plates. When the people come into the church, they have indicated on the envelope, this is for an offering for the foreign missionary. This is my tenth, that is tithe. This is my second tithe. This is money for benevolent. And then they should be put in a chest, in a box, whichever place, and the people should pass into their benches quietly so that they may have the sanctity of the house of the Lord may be observed. And so there is a lot of merchandise going on in the house of God. There is selling of things brought in the camp meetings in the house of the Lord, but this is only money changing. I pray that we will consider these things and we receive the truth because it is truth, and truth cannot be forced on the people. Truth will defend itself. And so let us present the truth. Let the people decide what to do, but let truth remain truth, even if every man remains a liar. So may the Lord bless us, and may we consider these things, and blessings and blessed Sabbath. Bye for now.